Good evening and welcome to this special Vote 2014 edition of Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. Tonight's show is a debate. We will hear from candidates competing for Arizona's Congressional District 1. As with all of Arizona Horizon's debates, this is not a formal exercise. It's an open exchange of ideas, an opportunity for give and take between candidates for one of the state's most important offices. As such, interjections and even interruptions are allowed, provided that all sides get a fair shake, and as always, we will do our best to see that that happens. CD1 is a huge district that covers most of northeastern Arizona and much of the eastern parts of the state. It is the 10th largest district in the country and has more American Indians than any district nationwide. Two candidates are competing to represent CD1. They are Congressional District 1 incumbent Ann Kirkpatrick, a Democrat, and Republican challenger and Speaker of the Arizona House, Andy Tobin. Each candidate will have 1 minute for opening and closing statements. Earlier, we drew numbers to see who goes first, and that honor goes to Ann Kirkpatrick.
I'm Ann Kirkpatrick. I was born and raised in Congressional District 1. I was born in the timber town of McNary. My mother's family were Republican ranchers in the area, and my dad's family were Democratic businessmen. And I say we always had lively discussions and debates, but at the end of the day, we were all family. And I've taken that background and experience to Washington, D.C. and in Congress and reached across the aisle to get results. At the end of the day, after we have lively debates, we're all Americans. I have a vision for Congressional District 1, and that is building a diversified, stable economy. I saw firsthand what happened in McNary when we lost the timber industry and what happened to those families when they were without jobs. So my top three priorities are creating good paying jobs, fighting for our veterans to make sure that they have the benefits they've earned, and reaching across the aisle and getting results. All
right, thank you very much. For the next opening statement, we turn to Andy Tobin.
Thanks, Ted. Thank you, Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, for being here too. First off, I'm going to be a grandfather in March, and so I had to take some of my family time here to make sure I announced that. And my daughter used to work at Phoenix Children's Hospital, and it's Teddy Bear Miracle Matters right now at 602-933-4567. So call in, but wait till the debate's over. I'm a father of five. I have 5 children and raised them in rural Arizona. My wife and I are married 29 years. Sorry, honey. My grandparents were Irish immigrants. My dad was a retired New York City police officer and retired Navy veteran. My mom raised 6 kids and worked as well. So I have a background in banking and insurance and aerospace and community service. I served as national president of the JCs. My program here is that we have lost touch with our district, and Washington has just totally ignored them. So I'm here to make sure that they don't get ignored anymore. So thank you.
All right, thank you both. Let's start with a couple of ads that we have seen on both sides quite a bit. We'll start with you, Congresswoman. The Democratic Congressional Committee ad blames Andy Tobin for cuts to Arizona education, for cuts to child protective services. Do you agree with those ads?
I do, and I know Mr. Tobin touts that he's been able to cut the state budget, but there's a right and wrong way to do that. Education is very important, and as I said, I have a vision for Arizona of a diversified, stable economy, and talking with business leaders, we have to improve our education system. That's not a place where we should have cut. And so it's critical to businesses that want to come into Arizona and locate here that we have good schools. That's what they're looking for.
Can it be argued, though, that he was also Speaker when CPS was overhauled and the attendant funding was approved?
That happened as well. However, he was Speaker when they cut the budget and cut the CPS budget, and that's the problem. The problem is that there's a way to do budgeting where you set your priorities, but don't do it on the backs of vulnerable children.
I want you to respond to this, and then we'll get to the Republican ad, please.
Oh, that's fine. The answer is Congresswoman Kirkpatrick has never cut a nickel out of the big budget. We're $17 trillion in the hole. Here in Arizona, we can't print money. I know that Washington doesn't understand that. The Arizona School Board Association, when I was vice chairman of the K-12 committee, named me Legislator of the Year. The School Superintendents Association named me Legislator of the Year. The School for the Deaf and Blind named me Legislator of the Year. So I have to share with you that as you're going through this process, there is give and take. And when we really needed revenue, I'm a Republican. You watched this debate that we had in the primary. I supported Prop 100. I got slaughtered for supporting Prop 100. I was out there working on getting a tax issue to the voters so that we can bring in more revenue to save schools. But that wasn't the only one. Coconino Community College. We went ahead and tried to help them as well. So as you look towards this record, where they talk about Andy Tobin doesn't like education, I have 5 kids graduated from high school and public school, community college, all went to community college. These are critical to our community. So,
Okay,
but you have to live in a budget. You have to have a
Let me
budget
just address a
somewhere.
piece of that. I mean, actually, the deficit has gone down 60%. It's on track this year to be the lowest it's been since 2008. And so the Great Recession was tough. And you know, it really was about getting people back to work. But we're going in the direction of deficit reduction, and we've made huge strides.
The Republican ad,
Yeah.
National Committee ad, shows a couple of women's legs. I'm assuming they were representing Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, saying that she's carrying baggage, toting luggage for President Obama, Nancy Pelosi, these sort. You agree with that ad?
Well, I don't like the videos anyway. I just assume we go from town to town and have a debate in everybody's town rather than play this thing on the TV. But I think it's clear that Congresswoman Kirkpatrick stands with President Obama. And I think that's part of the critical crisis that we're going through in rural Arizona today. You know, Congresswoman Kirkpatrick voted to close Gitmo, which means we're looking at putting terrorists on U.S. soil. I mean, that is not rural Arizona. That is an absurd decision to make so that these people come here. And today our young folks are fighting in a war somewhere else. We didn't even have a strategy a month ago.
Toting the President and Nancy Pelosi's baggage.
Well, let me first say that those aren't my high heels, these are my boots. So I want your viewers to see that these are actually the real thing. And I actually have one of the most independent records of a member of Congress because I always put my district first. And I'll give you an example of that. My district has 4 coal-fired plants, and I've been fighting with the EPA since 2009 when all of Arizona's congressional delegation signed on to a letter saying, you know, back off. And we continue to fight that battle. Even today, APS and SRP put out a statement really acknowledging my fight against the EPA. And so that's an example of bucking my party. But look, Ted, Congressional District 1 is extremely diverse, and anyone who toes the party line can't represent that district well.
The fact that she has worked with Representative Gosar on forest health, on I don't know if the Blue Ridge Reservoir was with Gosar, but I know you work with that as well. The Superior Copper Mine, is that a partisan?
Well, I don't think those are partisan, but Congresswoman Kirkpatrick, but it's not just Gitmo. I have listed, I call it the 10 Commandments, but I think there's 15 of them. You're never ending record voting with Nancy Pelosi. Your own colleagues here in Arizona disagreed with you and voted differently than you did on a lot of these issues. When you said you can change your plan, your Obamacare plan, then you voted not to let them change it, or you could keep it. Then you said they can't keep it. You know, we're trying to figure out exactly who this is that's representing us, because if you go up to where you just voted no to allow Cholla to close 1/3, and the argument is oh, well, you know, APS and SRP, they know I'm battling for them. That's not true. I mean, they're fighting negotiations with a gun to their head, and all of a sudden they're like, well, we're going to help.
Let's let her respond.
Sure,
Yeah,
let's
no,
do that.
I mean, it is true. I put my district first, and you're right. Congressman Gosar and I are working very well together on a number of Arizona-specific things. And your viewers may remember that he's the gentleman who beat me in 2010. After the 2012 election, because he ran in a different district, we're both in Congress together, and we represent most of rural Arizona. So we are working on projects like a transportation corridor called the I-11. We are working together on the Resolution Copper Mine issue. This year we had good success working together on a subdivision outside of Flagstaff where there had been an erroneous survey. It's called Mountain Air, and we're actually able to get that bill signed into law and make a real difference for real people in the district.
As far as back to the idea of education cuts and CPS and this sort of thing, critics say you voted to cut over $1 billion from Arizona schools. Are they wrong?
Well, I think you have to argue that while you're cutting dollars, what are you replacing them with? And I think if you look back on what we were left with after Congresswoman Kirkpatrick left here and left us in the hole, then we have to come and resurrect. So, Ted, as I mentioned before, where are you going to get the money if you can't print it like they can in Washington, D.C.? We can't print it here. So the answer is, yes, you make the cuts, but then you look for revenue. We borrowed on the building. How many times did I get beat up for borrowing on the buildings to prevent further cuts into the K-12 system? You know, my daughter wants to be a teacher. She wants to go teach math. That's where she wants to go. Of course, our family is huge on supporting education. I stood there with my own Chino Valley School District and supported their bond issue. And with Coconino Community College, I hear you, with Coconino Community College, on their bond issue, I paid my own money and put a letter in to their tax guide. So that's putting your money where your mouth is and supporting.
What we really need to be focused on is jobs. You know, Arizona's unemployment rate is higher than the national unemployment. And we really need to build that diversified, stable economy in Arizona. How do we do that? I'm on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and one of the big successes last year out of Congress was passing the Water Resources Reform and, Water Resources Development Act called WRDA. And in that, we were able to get funding for 3 really important projects in Congressional District 1. And so that was the Winslow Levee, the Rio de Flag and Flagstaff, and the Lower Santa Cruz River Flood Mitigation Plan. So we know a lot about flooding recently because we had those horrific rains not too long ago.
You mentioned jobs, though.
Yes,
and there are those who say that to get jobs, you need to stimulate the economy, and to stimulate the economy, you need to cut taxes. Do you agree?
I do not agree. And I agree that taxes should be fair and they should be apportioned correctly. But we need to, you know, the way you do budgeting is you set your priorities. And then you build your taxes around that. So we need to make Arizona a business-friendly state so that we can attract businesses. But it's not just tax cuts, it's building up our infrastructure, and that includes building up our schools, and we've got to really focus on that and having good paying schools.
The idea that tax cuts leads to a stronger economy. We've had tax cuts for years here in Arizona, and our jobless rate is lagging the national average. What's going on here?
Well, it's lagging the national average because Washington's got their foot on our throat, is what's going on.
Explain.
Well, look at what the EPA does to our businesses. Look at the coal mines. Look what's happening there. And Congresswoman Kirkpatrick talks about the Resolution copper mine, but Harry Reid won't move it off of his desk. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's still Washington that steps on.
I'm sorry, you're completely wrong because, you know, it's your policies that businesses are looking at, and let me just outline those. You're opposed to immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform.
That's never true.
You slammed through the House of Representatives the very discriminatory bill 1062, which almost cost us the Super Bowl. Well, and those gave Arizona a black eye. And then you refused to provide the funding for our most vulnerable children and for education and building good schools. That's what businesses look at if they're going to come to Arizona. Yeah,
well, I think it's for someone to first say, yes, we're in trouble, and yet we have to have a balanced way of doing things, who has never balanced a budget in Washington. I mean, I don't think the president's brought one to the White House. I think they got one passed. When Ann Kirkpatrick was in the legislature or in the Congress the first time, if they wanted immigration reform, they had the House, they had the Senate, they had the White House. They could have passed everything they wanted, but they didn't. Our corporate tax rate is so abysmally high. We are driving businesses out of our country, out of our country. Why would you, Ted, come to Page, Arizona and invest there if you're thinking they're closing down 1/3 of that coal mine? 1/3. Why would you go to Winslow or Holbrook? Ann Kirkpatrick supports what the EPA does.
I do
she
not.
doesn't stand there and fight back on.
You are absolutely wrong
Congresswoman,
about that.
just last week you went
my
ahead and
records
voted.
show.
Just last week.
Yes, let me talk about that bill
Okay,
last
good,
week.
because
that
there's
was
about
a bill,
4 more.
That was a bill that was a composite of 11 pieces of legislation we had already passed out of the House. And there were some I agreed with and some I disagreed with. For example, one of the things I disagreed with is it completely eliminated any kind of environmental regulations. That goes too far. One of the things I did vote for was protecting coal mining jobs because this district has a coal mine. But it's about balancing the competing interests.
The idea of voting against or for a bill that is full of other things. How far do you go when you say someone's for or against individual things?
Well, then drop your own bill and say, hey, here's my bill to stop the EPA. That's not what's going on. What's going on is the EPA.
You missed the point. We already had voted on those.
Let him finish, please.
But you never dropped a bill before this one to say stop. Where's that bill? When you can go back to Washington and says, Mr. EPA, let's say you are going to clean up all our air. instead of sitting there and dumping the bill on the Arizona citizen. Why don't you go fund that, Ann Kirkpatrick?
Let's look
Why
at
don't you go
actions,
fund that?
not your
yeah, I'd love
words.
to, because
you
haven't passed any. You don't have any action.
No,
when you
of course
can.
I do. Of course I
Yeah.
do. Let me talk about my
Okay.
record, because I have one of the most successful records of a member of Congress. So I had 7 bills in my first term that were passed into law. This term I've had 3 that are signed into law, and I'm in the minority. The first one was the VA Corps, which streamlined the veterans claims process. That was signed into law in December of last year. I talked about the Mountain Air bill that Mr. Gosar and I worked on together, which was signed into law in May of this year. And then most recently, we did the most comprehensive reform of the Veterans Administration since 1999. Done all of that work in a bipartisan way, reaching across the aisle and coming to consensus.
Last point on this. You have described Congresswoman Kirkpatrick's record in Congress as, quote, disastrous.
Yes, it is disastrous.
How?
I just explained. You have the EPA. She sits on the Veterans Committee, and she sits on transportation. Can anybody have believed, growing up in this country, that the VA would have collapsed like they did under her watch? I can't. But my point is that fixing problems after they've already happened is like the president's strategy that he never had. Oh, let's go in and let's do something now. So they're behind the cart. They're just reacting. They're not leading. They're reacting to something.
But Mr. Tobin, you slammed through the legislature this very discriminatory bill, Senate Bill 1062, that almost cost us the Super Bowl. Thank heavens the governor vetoed it.
Well, Ann Kirkpatrick, you didn't say a word about that bill the year before when she vetoed it because the budget hadn't passed. And I agree that more debate should have happened on that bill, but this time the governor was at the table. All the senators, the Republican senators, all voted
Well,
yes.
I just want to
It
say
wasn't
your
crammed
record and
through.
your policies are not good for Congressional District 1.
Oh, good.
And
Let's-
okay.
we got to get moving.
Okay.
I want to
Yeah.
get back to immigration. I know we've touched
Great.
on it a little bit, but as
Great.
far as immigration is concerned, the Gang of 8 bill coming from the Senate, if
Yeah.
you were in the House right now, would you vote for it?
No, I would not.
Why
It
not?
is a pathway to citizenship that I've totally disagreed with it. Our border is not secure. The triggers in there come after the fact. You can't sit across the table from this president, shake his hand, and believe he's going to tell you the truth when he says he's going to secure the border. It isn't going to happen. Ann Kirkpatrick's record on border security, time and time again, even in her record in the state legislature, so we knew this was going to happen going forward, is also abysmal. It's securing the border gives you an opportunity to then move forward.
Define securing the border.
I think we have to have our governor's panel sit there and work with the border patrol and say, here's what a secure peace looks like. Because if you send it back to Washington to have this conversation, you'll be 20 years still there worrying about whose pie is going to get gored.
The idea of the Senate bill, Republicans in the House are saying, forget comprehensive reform, go in stages, go piecemeal, if you will. Is that a bad idea?
I support the comprehensive immigration reform bill that was negotiated by our senators. They were very active in that. It has strong resources for securing the border. But let me just say that the border will be secure when the people who live on the border feel that it's secure. And I talk with ranchers on a regular basis down there about what's going on. And they tell me, Ann, look, you've got to do comprehensive immigration reform. There are 2 pieces of this. I'm a former prosecutor. And there's the criminal element that's coming across, and I have zero tolerance for that. But there's an economic piece. And we have a lot of farmers in this congressional district who rely on guest workers to come and help them in their fields. And they support comprehensive immigration reform.
How do you work that balance to get the labor that business says it needs and also eliminate the pathway to citizenship, as you say?
Well, you have to have will. You have to secure the border and say this is how it works. When the Democrats were all in charge, they didn't think that was a problem, or they would have secured the border and then moved forward on immigration reform. That hasn't happened. So now it comes to Congress where they're battling over, okay, how does this work and can this happen? If you took citizenship off the table, I will bet you that bill would have already passed. But they can't seem to do that.
The idea that there are 11 some odd million people here unauthorized, Republicans will say that the rule of law, the rule of law is being violated here. Something needs to be done regarding just simply following the rules. How do you respond?
I have an immigration advisory group. It's a very broad spectrum. It includes faith-based groups, business groups, farmers, ranchers, dreamers, and there's a real consensus that we need to have a very tough, fair, comprehensive immigration bill. And that's the next step for Arizona in terms of building this diversified, stable economy. We've got to get this done. One of the reasons I originally ran for Congress was my frustration at the state legislature, and I'm sure Mr. Tobin is reflecting some of his frustration that Congress hasn't gotten this done. But it can't be a state-by-state piecemeal reform. Congress has to do this.
One more thing on immigration. Should dreamers, those born in Mexico and other areas outside the country, but raised almost entirely here, should dreamers be deported?
If they are here, I have a problem with sending children back to countries they've never been from or in languages they've never known. I've always had a problem with that. But if you had a border security that was comprehensive and done at the border, I think we can start having that conversation about what does presence mean. I think we can have that conversation.
But is that not amnesty?
Well, I believe presence is not amnesty. I believe is giving someone citizenship. I don't believe that that's the direction we go. We secure the border, then we can move forward on what the business community is looking for and say, how do we make this work? But I don't believe that this president can stand by his word and say, I'm going to secure the border, and Congresswoman Kirkpatrick believes he will.
Yeah, you voted for the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, if you will.
Yes.
Why?
One of the unique things about Congressional District 1 is that the 2010 census told us that over 60% of the people in the district were either eligible or already on some kind of public health care. So that includes veterans, Indian Health Services, Medicaid, and Medicare. And so we just got the figures about the enrollment. 21,000 people have enrolled in the marketplace. That includes those young people who are under 26 who are on their parents' insurance, and 21,000 people on Medicaid. Now, Mr. Tobin, again, his policy is to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and he fought Medicaid expansion. He fought our governor, even sued over Medicaid expansion. That is just wrong for Congressional District 1.
Yeah, well, I oppose Obamacare. I make no bones about it, that it's bankrupting rural Arizona, if not the rest of the country. We have doctors today, okay, remember about what Obamacare was. They partially funded this thing with almost $1 trillion cut in Medicare reimbursement. $1 trillion over 10 years. That is driving physicians out of their offices, maybe in the hospitals for a contract, maybe they just give up and retire, maybe they move to the valley. We can't afford to lose physicians in rural Arizona. There's already not enough places to go and be a part of. So
for those who are saying that the more people are being insured, the more insurance companies are signing on, premiums are rising at a slower pace than they were before, you say?
So the premiums rose catastrophically last year, and this year they're just going up, double digits. Okay, that's supposed to be good news? I mean, I share with you, Ted, that this process, and we're not yet done. I mean, the rollout, people have almost given up on because they're so fearful of who's going to get thrown off, who's not going to end up with their tax credits when they file their taxes. I mean, this has been so poorly rolled out and so poorly concocted without a single Republican. You can't say you're bipartisan and crush this thing through on top of the American people.
Country can't afford it, fuels the national debt.
Valid?
Is that valid?
Yeah, well, a couple things. Let me first say that a huge piece of the Affordable Care Act was the permanent reauthorization of Indian Health Services. So this district is 25% Native American, as you mentioned. And so they had fought for a long time for that permanent reauthorization. But when it comes to costs, actually the costs in Medicare have gone down, so much so that they've actually extended the life of Medicare. Now, we need to continue to lower health care costs, but at least they're going in the right direction. But Ted, I have to tell you, I talk to people almost on a daily basis who now have coverage who never had it before. I have a friend in Flagstaff where I live and who is a cancer survivor. And during his treatment, he was constantly contacting me. I'm dreading the day I'm going to get the letter that I'm kicked off my insurance. Guess what? He can't get kicked off his insurance. He still has that insurance. And thank heavens.
How do you respond to that story?
Well, a pre-existing condition should be one of the things we solve, but the way they have done this is not the way it's supposed to work. What we have is a crisis with 5 key issues in healthcare. Let's face it, Ted, when you and your wife or your daughter, they go to the doctor, that is not bankrupting our healthcare system to have a checkup every year. What's bankrupting our healthcare system is diabetes, cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, transplants. Those are bankrupting our system. You don't solve those problems by taking over, these trillions. You're trying to rush me. Taking over these trillions of dollars in this economy and say this works better if the government does it.
Ted,
Is that just
Ted,
like
all
the VA?
data,
The VA works better now if the government does. They've just been fixing
all
it again.
All the data does not, none of it, or I should say none of the data supports that the system's going bankrupt. But I will say that the Affordable Care Act is not perfect, and we need to continue to work on trying to improve it and make it better. And one of the things, I'm a former hospital attorney. I represented Flagstaff Regional Medical Center for over 20 years. And we need to find out a way to secure proper reimbursement, reasonable reimbursement for our physicians.
Well, I'm going to rush you here because we have very little time left.
Yeah,
should repealing the Affordable Care Act be used as, like the debt limit or these sorts of things, shutting government down, should those things be used as leverage?
No, I don't believe.
Okay, so you would disagree with House Republicans on those
I don't
lines.
believe in shutting the government down. I never have. What I will tell you, you just heard Congresswoman Kirkpatrick agree, yes, they cut Medicare by $1 trillion and say, gosh, we have to give the doctors the money back. That's what she just said. So I share with you that this is like the president who didn't have a strategy 2 weeks ago. We're just playing this as the cards turn. That is killing Arizona, is killing long-term investment, and we can't get from point A and bring Arizona out of their problem without having some long-term strategy.
All right. We got to stop it right there because we got
nice
to
to
get to
have you.
closing remarks. Each candidate will now give a 1-minute closing statement, and going in reverse order of the opening remarks, we start with Andy Tobin.
Thank you so much. Thank you, visitors, viewers, for being here tonight. Just yesterday, our young men and women embarked on another crusade to save other people in lands far away that they've never been to people they've never known, to fight for their freedom. And I want to speak to them and their families directly tonight. And I want to tell you that there is an America who is proud of you. There is a place in our hearts that is with you always. So I wanted to share that with you before we got into any further discussion tonight about all this, but I didn't have a chance sooner. So I will tell you, national security is at the top of my list. Releasing prisoners to come to the states by closing Gitmo is appalling, and you should not worry that the Republicans will be there for you. So I thank you for taking some time to be with us tonight. I share with you the border security and my plan for a great vision of Arizona and rural Arizona, where I've raised my children and my family. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
my pleasure.
And now, Ann Kirkpatrick with her closing remarks.
I'm Ann Kirkpatrick, and thank you viewers for watching this lively debate tonight. And you know, I will continue to work hard for Congressional District 1. That's where my heart is, that's where my roots are. But the way you get things done is, just as we have learned in our small towns, is you work together. Regardless of party, we're just looking for good ideas that will result in solutions. My record shows that I will continue to do that. I have done that. My opponent, unfortunately, is one of the few candidates in the state of Arizona who can't vote for himself because he doesn't live in the district. That's not representation. And so I thank you again. I thank our veterans out there who are watching this. Thank you for our services. I have a special place in my heart for you, and I'll continue to fight for you because you've already paid the price, and now we have to fight for you with all our might. Thank you.
All right, and thank you, and thank you for watching the special Vote 2014 debate. I'm Ted Simons. You have a great evening.